Surface Pro microphone.
You're not using your recording mic, the one that you're
No,
using?
I can't. I can't. It's like
Oh, you
it
know what?
doesn't work on my Surface for some reason, so I
I
just have to
don't
default.
I don't want to hear your excuses. I feel that I'm
I
not
am
good enough
sorry.
for your
I've
bedroom mic.
disappointed the audiophiles everywhere with my shitty audio quality.
I know as you should be, but enough of that casual talk. Today we have our second episodes of Audio Discord, but this one is a very special one, more of like a one-on-one episode. And with me, a man so famous, I think he should give me introduction. But how are you doing today, Trin?
Good. They caught me in the middle of doing a review, my job, but sure.
Yeah, thank you for interrupting your job for us for this, this such a small podcast. But when I say a special one, I mean it's just like we're doing this two-part, maybe like interview thing as the structure goes. Maybe the first part is just me talking to Corinne about his history and his how he got into the Portified game, how he became a reviewer, and how he's became famous for his measuring and his reviews. And maybe the second part is just the more the spicier aftertaste. Me asking him some more of a opinionated piece about about his most recent collaboration and his and what I thought of him as the most recent reviewer. So why don't we start, from the beginning? So in the beginning, there was nothing. How did you became like got into the whole IEM hobby?
Uh, do you want to start with my career or with how I started in the hobby in the first place?
Well, how did you start with a hobby? Just like maybe like a
Okay,
short.
my my roots are very simple, very common. I am like everyone else. I started out with the Audio Technica M50, the original M50. There's no X, there's no S. It was just called M50 back then.
Right.
And I did my research, and there were a lot of shows out there that they were saying like how the M50 was the best thing that you could get for $100. And at that point, I just went down to the audio store, which was called Stereo, and I bought an M50. And yeah, that basically just started the whole rabbit hole of me going to audio and just buying stuff, just buying stuff in pursuit of better sound.
Right.
And if you're talking about IEMs,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I remember my first big boy IEMs, and that
Right.
was like the Klipsch S4. He was also very hyped, but it was like one of those mainstream hypes that you see like on the CNET. Yeah, it was very mainstream, and I don't know why I acquired an IEM back then, but I got the S4. It was my first IEM that I don't actually remember that much of because I didn't actually use it that much. But my most significant IEM after that was the Ultimate Years Triple Fi 10. I think everyone that was an audiophile in like 2010 or 2011 would have owned a TF10 at some
Right.
point.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and the in thing, like there are fads in audio as well.
Mm-hmm.
Back in like 2011, 2012, the in thing was to buy a TF10
Uh-huh.
during Black Friday for 100 USD, and the MSRP was like $400, I think.
Right.
So
Right.
this was a massive, massive discount. So people would say, you know what, you just buy a TF10, resell it, and you get
Right.
your own really, really cheap custom. Because back then, like the cheapest custom that you could get was like a JH5, and even then it was $500, $600 for a dual channel setup. So reselling a TF10, at this time, people were very, very concerned about driver counts. So it'd be like, oh my God, a triple driver custom for like $350, sign me up. Everyone bought it. And I did as well because I was a young and impressionable guy. And then just wanted to copy what the cool kids were doing as well.
Right.
And I did a reshell with a company that has now since been dissolved. And it was my first custom,
Did
the
you still
TF10
remember what that
reshell,
company was?
Stage 93.
Okay.
I remember. I remember because they fucked up my order. I
Oh,
ordered
okay.
like I ordered a smoke shell. I
Mm-hmm.
remember this. I hold such a grudge because of this. I ordered a smoke shell with an aluminum faceplate, and they gave me a black faceplate with a clear shell. I don't know how they fucked it up that badly, but it was not like a different order. It's not like I got a different person's order, because this was very clearly my customs, my impressions. So
Right.
it just fucked up monumentally. And I was just so pissed, because again, this was my first customs. Everyone remembers their first customs. It's like the path of being a man, for like the equivalent of being an IEM audiophile. So for me, this was like, oh my god, is this how customs IEMs were? And just like a year later or 2 years later, the whole company, Station 93, just completely vanished.
So you hated
Just
them so much that you just dissolved the entire company. Have you been always been like crushing company without just knowing it? If they
I
fucked up
I
your
wish
order,
I had the
you
power again. No one knew who I was in like 2012. I don't think I was responsible for anything.
okay, so you
But
don't have
yeah, but I
fault.
I think it's just their gross incompetence that just got themselves completely bankrupted and whatever. But it
Yeah,
was it, it was an interesting experience. I still have one side of the of those customs. The other side is lost, but my left side will live with me forever.
right. So I actually have a pair of my TF10. I actually went through two pairs of TF10, and that was
Mm.
not because of you. And I actually, when I found out, you used to have a pair of TF10, I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of a." I feel a little bit
I
honored
yeah, I
to say.
actually bought a pair of TF10s like 3 or 2 years ago, just out
Okay.
of pure nostalgia.
How do
I
they
was like,
sound
yeah,
now? Do they sound as good as you remember?
they sounded warm, I guess. And you know what? Again, it's all about the nostalgia. I know at some point that you're not gonna be able to buy TF10s anymore, and yeah, I just bought it because I wanted something to collect, or at least
Yeah.
something significant to me to collect. I'm
Right.
not I'm not an IEM collector by any means. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about your also famous, your measuring rigs. I know it went through a few iterations. So like,
Right. Yeah.
and what was like the first rig, and how did it like improved over time?
Right. So okay, I need to give credit. Just give me a while to search up what this guy's name is. Yes. All right. So my first rig was called the Dayton IMM6 rig, which was basically this thing. It's a TRRS microphone as well as a headphone jack out, made for the iPhone or any smartphone. And I got this idea from this guy called Nikolaus Matthias. I'm not sure if it's still active, but he has a YouTube video of that, and that was the guide. That was the guide that I used. I did not invent the method of measuring IEMs using this rig. It was entirely this guy called Nikolaus.
Okay.
So I took it, and then I realized I don't know what made me think, but I realized that, you know what, there are so many audio stores around me, because I was in Singapore and there's like 6 or 7 here. So I thought to myself, you know what, maybe I should just measure things that are in the store. And this was like in late 2016. Yeah, it was like late 2016, and then I just took this very, very basic rig that was using like a vinyl tube as a coupler,
Right.
and just going around audio stores, just measuring everything. And I started a hit fight thread, because it was a work in progress. So I just
Hmm.
realized that, I might as well just start like a journal, and I'm not gonna start like a blog spot or anything. I'll just post it in like my own thread on HitFi. It just makes things simpler for me as well. So that was how the thread started. It started out with the measurements first,
Hmm.
and then yeah, from then on, the ranking list came into view, because people were constantly asking me like, "Hey, you've measured this thing. How does this thing sound?" And then you're saying like, "Oh, you measured these two things. Like, how is this thing better than that thing?" And I was so frustrated with all of these questions. People just asking, just pointing at something I've measured and asking me like, hey, what do you think about this one? So I just decided, I just make a master list. It started out as a master list of impressions. I'll just be like, you know what, just put like a few comments on every single IM I've tried. Then again, people still ask like, hey, like, is this one better than that one? So I just like, you know what? Now it's time to make the ranking list. It's like everything ordered in order of what I think is good. So people will just stop asking me altogether. So yeah, that's how the ranking list started. Like I know some people think that the ranking list started and then the measurements came afterwards, but it's actually the opposite. Like
Right.
the measurements started first with very, very ghetto measurements, like very, very basic measurements. And then afterwards, the ranking list came out because I was annoyed by questions.
Right. And seeing like one of your very old posts about a picture of your first measuring rig and compared to the one that you have right now. Again, I'm not any way a professional in this. It does look a lot more like it feels like it's a lot more jury rig. It feels a lot more basic than your first rig. And and I like the fact that you touch up on the fact that you were always a measurement guy first, and the ranking list came as a result of people asking you because you have measured all these IN. So like on your first iteration of your ranking list and your measurement list, and how many IMs were there on your first like ranking list post?
Okay, at the time that I created the ranking list, I believe I had about 150 IEMs on the measurements database.
Mm-hmm.
And my first iteration, if I can remember correctly, I'm sure I can just go into Hitfile and just fact check this, but I'm too lazy.
Yeah.
I think it's 60. I think my first iteration of the ranking list was 60, maybe 50 something. I think. I'm still not sure. It was definitely nowhere close to the 100 range.
Right.
So it
We're,
was
we're,
it was relatively short, but then again, 50 is a lot. Like you could count to 50 right now, and it would take you a very, very long time to count just to count to 50. So it was a very, very long endeavor just to rank these like 50 or so IEMs into a
right.
ascending list of performance, or of what I believe is performance. So it took me 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. It took me 2 months to finalize the rankings of everything that was in the ranking list.
And 50 IM is a lot more IMs like and than most people would have heard like or demo or let alone having to write down some kind of impression for. So like since you're touching up on the ranking list, like was like in the beginning of the ranking list, was the ranking system that well defined that you always had letter grade assigned to each category?
In the very, very again in the very, very
Yeah, in the
early
beginning.
versions of it, it was just an impression. It's just an
Okay.
impressions list, like an impressions thing. But yes, the first time that I decided to create the ranking list, it was basically an alphabet. It was using a letter grade system.
Right.
From the start, it was using the letter grade system. Okay, I believe I started out with only a letter grade system, as in S, A, B, C, D, E, F, without the plus and minuses.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized that even within these like tiers, I was ranking things that I thought, while were similar in performance, some were very clearly better than what I had shoehorned them into. So I realized that I had to split it up slightly more, and then now we have the A plus, A
Right.
minus kind of system that I think is, while still complex, it's simple enough that I don't have to, split it up any further.
Right. So it's a little bit less. It's just a letter grade before, and now it's more like way more well defined with your plus and minus systems, and you have
Yeah.
recently give it like the star
Yeah,
ranking.
the star
Yeah.
system would be because that's the ranking system is just purely based off of what I think is objective performance,
Right.
regardless of price. So a lot of people were very confused. They'll be like, well, like why is this thing at S and oh sorry, why is this thing at B and this thing at C? But then you praise this IEM instead of the one that's ranked at B.
Right.
Yeah, so at that point, well, that's where the concept of value for money is, like price of performance. So having the star is just there to make things simpler. I'm sure even without the star, people can already have a good idea of price of performance.
Right.
But the star rating is just there to make things much more simpler for well the general masses that aren't very familiar with my ranking list in the first place.
So when you introduce this ranking list, like how many IEM was on there? Like you know, when you have your 50-ish, it's just impression, right? And you have this ranking list post, which is that
Which
post,
was like 50-ish. Yeah.
right? But that post is now still one of the most popular Hit 5 posts on the website. So like it's just 50-ish, and out of these 50-ish IEM, I'm curious, right? You always had that S rank that you know that everybody like praise and
Mm-hmm.
just look at that section. What was that first ever S tier IEM? I always wonder.
What was what? Sorry, I
What was your
missed that.
first S tier IEM on your like the first 50
Oh
IEM?
my god, I actually forgot.
Oh wow.
I remember one of them. It was
What
called
was
the
the
Unique Melody Legacy.
ah
Yeah, it
that
was
was
a
the Singapore
it was
exclusive for UM, is that
yeah,
correct?
it was very good. It's still a very good IEM. I think it has aged a bit. You know, the competition's getting very stiff. They can't really compete with the new boys right now. But back then, it was quite. It was. I would consider it the one of the best IEMs that you could get. And
Right.
for a while as well, the Viento was in S as well. And
Back in the
then
day.
yeah, back
Wow.
in the earlier iterations of the ranking list, the Viento was there.
Uh-huh. So you
But
always had a history
I
with that.
realized, but here's the thing: the Viento that I tried was was a demo unit, but a
Mm-hmm.
demo unit doesn't have tips. It was basically a glorified custom.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
So, but even then, it sounded very good to me.
okay.
So, but at any case, I thought that it was a flawed. It was not right for me to rank something that high and you know using this piece of shit demo unit. Maybe something was going on. Maybe I had a unicorn unit, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, you know, I'm just going to remove it. The next time I'm going to try a Viento again, then I would re-add it. And it wasn't
Wow.
until like last year that I managed to try Viento again. And yeah,
So
it was
like
still as great as I remembered it being, and it's still and it was released in 2014, and that's the most amazing thing. It
right.
was released in 2014. 6 years on, it still remains as one of the best IEMs that you can get today.
Um I don't know if you know if you didn't notice we're not a high edition podcast, but it seems funny that you know it's the gap between you first
I mean, you were asking me like, what was
right
one of
of
the
course
first
of course
IEMs that I ranked at S,
right
and that was the most memorable one that I can remember
yeah
besides Legacy.
mm-hmm. And it's been how many years since you first demoed it and now you put it back on it must have been like 4 or 5 years, right?
No, I mean,
Or
I first demoed it in like 2015.
okay, so it's
The
been like
ranking
four
list came
years
out in like late 2016. I'll just call it 2017.
mm-hmm.
And then yeah, I forgot how it sounded, removed it. I heard it again in 2019 or 2018. I forget when it was. And yeah, it was great. It was just as good as I remembered it, and I put it back on S.
Yeah, the ghost of Hydration haunts you to this day. But like again, I think you gather like you have a lot of your like already established fan base. I feel like they're mostly just from your two very like famous or infamous, however you want to call it, like head five posts. One, of course,
Mm-hmm.
on your ranking list, and one on your measurement rig. Now
Mm-hmm.
you went through another iteration of your you know your career where that on the Discord, but not well not your Discord, but what we now like what Headphone HQ,
Uh-huh.
they actually have a bot that can like compare your graph. Like how did that came to be like that project? It seems like a very big like endeavor.
There's really nothing much that I can talk about it. The guy was the owner of the server was called Sub, and he's a very, very good programmer, coder, whatever you want to call him. And he was transcribing, using a bot to transcribe measurements from the inner fidelity database.
Hmm.
So at that point, I pitched to him, like, you know what, since you're doing this thing for inner fidelity, maybe you could do a different thing but similar for my graphs. And so the system was very simple. Back then, I wasn't using raw data. Back then, it was just like an image file. So the
Hmm.
bot would just like analyze the image and look for the lines, and then basically put it onto a different graph and convert it to raw data, basically. And that was how the Discord bot works for HPHQ. And until now, it still uses my old database. They have not updated it to my new one.
Well, they don't have to. They don't have to use that anymore. And that was, would you say, like the first, the iteration of your ever popular graph comparison tool, right? They did
Yeah, it was a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like graph comparisons
Right,
are always going to be useful. I don't think that it was an iteration, more so as a natural progression.
right.
It was just like, oh, you know what? Like, I need something that could compare graphs because
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of graphs. So the Discord bot was still a very, very. It still had a lot of compromises because you had to like type in a lot of,
Right,
well, not say code, but you had to know the language of the bot
right,
in order to use it. And you didn't know what was inside the database. And I think that was the kicker for the bot,
mm-hmm.
because a lot of times people would just type in like things that they think are in a bot, but most of the time it's like not there, or even worse, the name in the bot is in a different spelling or in a different variation of the name in which they're trying to look up.
Right.
And they wouldn't know. They would just assume like, oh, this thing doesn't return any results. I guess I should just move on.
And I think and a lot of people use that tool, and back in the day there isn't really like that was you know probably like if I had to say the only thing that you can use that bot on
Yeah,
headphone
but I mean
headquarters.
back then, headphones.com, when it was still under Headroom, I believe, still had their graph comparison tool
Oh,
up.
okay.
But all of the graphs were made by Tal Hurston, so it's kind of like going back full circle again.
Oh, okay. Um, and I think uh, that's the other thing. Like you were like very big, and I think that's how I came to know you, and I feel like a lot of people came to know you as either the measurement person or the person with the list, right?
Yeah,
Because a lot of people would ask a question on like headphone HQ, and then people would like say, "Hey, which one should I buy, A or B?" And people would type in this like code on on hashtag IEM, right? And then they would go like, "Look at the graph," and as a newbie, like literally, like you would have no idea
yeah,
what
yeah. I remember those days.
yeah
Those were
mhm,
like the chaotic days of
yeah,
the
but
early Discord days.
mhm. But like even back then, like you were always known for being like as you still known as being the measurement slash ranking list guy, right? And when I don't even remember when I started, but when I first heard of you, it was from uh H HP HPHQ. I was in China. I broke my 535, and I was asking them, and I was ready to spend like big money, right? And then, and I
Yeah.
was like, I was trying like I never heard of this brand, right? It's called QDC. That's how I started, right? And I was like,
The
I heard of
spiral,
QDC. Oh my
the
god,
red pill.
it's your problem. I blame you for my problem. But I think there's a lot of like a lot of people starting out I think a lot of people have similar experience as me when you're just starting out, whether it be now or be like, like me, maybe like 3 years ago, just going onto like a server, just like, hey, what's good? And people would just like link your ranking list, right? And that was like the list. So like going back to me, right? Because I love talking about myself. And I was like, I was between. I was like, oh, okay, of course. Like back in the day, like my first, like my second IEM after my TF10 was like the 535, and obviously I had no idea what sounds good. And people link your list. I was like, well, I was kind of between two QDC models, V6 and the Gemini. And people go
Yeah.
like, and they say the magical phrase, like, buy the Gemini is rank S on Crinacle's tier list. And that
Yeah.
was the end of the story.
Sounds like something that
Doesn't that
would have
sound
happened,
familiar? Doesn't that sound
or
familiar?
would even happen today, actually.
Right. And you will have a newcomer, right? And on be it anybody's server, and then they would like I'm thinking about these two IEM, not maybe S tier, but they would a lot of people would link to your list as the list of ranking IEMs. But and even back then you always I remember when I just heard of you have like 200 some IEMs on a list, and it's somewhat like developing and already like pretty well defined when it comes to the S and the S minus range. Like what do you remember like back in the headphone HQ days? Like you anything like about your ranking list? And you hang out there pretty often too, right?
I just remember a lot of BB code, because that was the code that was used for HitFi,
Right.
and it was a nightmare. Like updating the list back
Mm-hmm.
then took like easily half a day, and that's just for like 10 or 20 entries.
Mm-hmm.
So and when you add it up, like when I started out with 60 maybe 70 IEMs on the list, and you build it up to about the 250 odd ones that I had before I switched from HitFi to my own website,
Right.
you can see how much man hours was spent like just updating that stupid list on HitFi.
And at that time is more like it's such it feels like such a committed hobby, like right? Like you like do
Committed.
well. I mean, like I don't
I
feel
still
like
think that it's a hobby, but yeah,
right,
I guess you could say that I was more committed than most audiophiles. Again, I was like measuring
right.
everything that I could get my hands on. I updated the list, and I basically had my own goal of listening to every single
Mm-hmm.
IEM on the planet that was available.
And even back in the day, I feel like you have this kind of like reputation that you have to uphold because like whenever these new things pop up, right, people will first to ask you, "Hey,
Oh yeah,
when will
yeah,
you be able to
yeah.
like
I
right,
remember a lot. Like I believe back then it was the Oracle Nick, yeah, like all the Oracle Nick stuff, like $6,000, and they were asking like, can you try it? And I was like, yeah, but no one's bringing it in because it's so goddamn expensive.
right?" And it's like like you and you're still getting the same same old question today, right? Something like something spicy comes up, people like, "Hey, when are you gonna review this? And when are you going to give it a
Yeah.
rank?"
Okay. So
Um,
so just as a clarification for
uh,
anyone who's gonna ask me that question as well, like are you gonna review this? Are you gonna review that? The answer is always gonna be yes if I can get access to it.
right.
Yeah, I am not limited by needs or wants. I mean, honestly, as long as the IEM props itself in front of me, I would absolutely do impressions of it. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is getting access to a lot of these IEMs, most of which would be Chi-Fi, and a lot of them, a lot of these shops they would not bring it in,
Mm-hmm.
or they would not send any to me because some of them view me as a sales killer, which is true for some and not so true for others because I'm just some guy who gives like a good or bad verdict based off you
Right.
know what
And
I feel about the IM. I'm
and
not
that
I'm
was
not
back in
gonna
the
shield
day.
everything. That's
And that
that's
was
that's the
back in the
problem.
day, huh? Still, like
Yeah.
like like those like you were again like and as you said you were in Singapore back in the day, and the stores already known you as the guy that's like brutally honest with his measuring rate. It's like, oh, he's here to try this new thing, and if he give it the thumbs down, it's pretty much sales goodbye for us. Was that the case back in the day already?
Honestly, I would say no.
No.
Or at least it wasn't until the Solaris.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we'll touch up on that maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, but okay, but before that fated encounter,
Hmm.
I think most shops have heard of me,
Right.
but they would just be like, oh, you know what, just let this guy do it. He's not he's a bit harmless, which is kind of true because at that point, you know, I was like, while my criticisms would be scathing at times, uh, I don't think it affected a lot of sales because, you know, fanboys will be fanboys. They will buy things regardless of what this random guy on the internet said about it, you know, is
Right.
bad or whatever. So I wasn't that influential, but I was influential in what I would say the hidden sales,
Hmm.
where it's like people who are on the fence, and then, you know, they when they see my reviews, they just go like, oh, you know what, I'm not gonna buy it anymore. Like
Right.
these people will not reflect on sales reports, you
Right.
know. Yeah, so it's very hard to see my influence again until that incident.
Until that incident. And
Yeah.
I feel like you do have more of a positive thing on the community back in the day, like a more I want well, as in I want to say like if you rank something badly, people will just like brush it off and say, oh, I won't buy it. But like if you does suddenly like a new thing, like I remember the first new S tier that popped up on your list and you created a hype train, and that was something else to behold. And again, we're gonna touch up on that a little bit later. But before that, why don't you talk about you were always known as these two posts. You always tie down to these two posts as the critical, the measuring guy and the rankings guys. And what
Mhm.
like started the whole your own website thing that you decided to do? Like what started
Yeah.
that?
I've written an article on that, like you could see it on my website as well,
Hmm.
but I'll just condense it.
Right.
Uh, Basically, officially at least, I was frustrated with HitFi's BB code implementation. Again, I said that
Right.
it took ages just to
Right.
update on that stupid forum. Don't nah, it's just frustrating, and it gives me an aneurysm just thinking about it again. And yeah, that was one of my primary motivations of moving away from HitFi. Of course, there are less altruistic motives, like, you know, I would rather not be associated as that HitFi reviewer,
Right.
or, you
Right.
know, yeah,
Hmm.
I don't want to be bogged down by the fact that I'm just a forum guy. And I started a website because, yes, first of all, I would have my own place to host my own measurements. And yeah, and the aforementioned, I wouldn't have to spend as much time updating the ranking list because now I could just upload an Excel file,
Hmm.
and the website would just convert everything for me.
Right. So it's more of like an efficient issue more than anything else, right?
Yeah, efficiency, you know, moving away from HitFi,
Right.
and well, advertising income is like a very separate one, but I
Right.
honestly didn't earn that
But
much from AdSense
oh
from the
no, but
first few months.
when you first started, you didn't really have like too much traction. I want to say like too much as in compared to now. Comparatively,
Yeah, I
you
mean
don't really
that
have.
that's kind of obvious,
Right.
isn't it? Like, yeah,
Right. Right.
you're not gonna start to hit the ground running.
Right. Right.
But you
And
know, I got like 60,000 page views on the first month, and that was
that's
way beyond what I
right.
was expecting.
Right. But
So at that point, I was like,
you
yeah,
had your head five followings that you kind of brought over, right? So
yeah, of course,
yeah, I think a lot of people, and that's when I think you get the big jump in your popularity, as in terms of like
yeah.
establish yourself as the person.
And starting the website as well was also around the time that I started my Patreon as well. So that was when
Right.
I was seeing like money flowing as well.
Hmm.
It's not a lot of money back then, but now
Right.
it's like, yeah, I could make it a full-time job.
Right. So like back in the day, it was just still a hobby, but then people were supporting you already, and the
Mhm.
first iteration of your ranking list, it was just still the 200 or some, right? And then you did some overhaul. So like
Yeah.
that was
I
still a
I
hobby,
I I do like mix-ups of like a few times a year, but you
right?
know, it's not
Right.
often. Yeah.
Right.
The point is it's not often.
You would do these dumps on the on your post about here's are the new IEMs that you rank, right? And here's are the ranking, and you would do maybe like a short review of it. And then those articles like back in the day, I remember it would be still hype because when you put something really higher up and people really took interest in that, like just the new things on the list, right? But talk to
Mm.
me more about how that graph comparison tool on your website came to be, because I feel like that's more like a big thing when you first introduced that.
It it's not an exciting story. It was very simple. Marshall Lockbaum, the guy who built it, I've credited him in the pages as well. He just PM'd me on HitFi one day and just offered to build it for me, and I was like, sure, and that's it. I offered to pay him the right uh fees for his time, but
Must be a rich man.
he's a very nice guy. He just told me, like, you know what, I'm going to do this for my own benefit anyways, so I might as well just let you have it as well. And his only stipulation was that it would be open source, so
Hmm.
again, anyone could use the graph tool, or sorry, anyone could publish their own graph tools using his code. And again,
Okay.
it's fine. I think that's great as well, like promoting a bit of competition, because honestly, I have a bit of a monopoly in the measurements game right now.
Well,
And
yes, in a way, yes.
yeah, and it makes me a bit uncomfortable as well, because it first of all, it just tells me, like, no one's really interested in carrying the torch, so called. So, but I think with this like new graph comparison tool, I think people like, even like Anthony is also considering like making his own graph comparison tool. And that's great, because the more data that we have in the environment that we're in, everyone simply benefits. Like,
Right.
it's also tiring for me to be the only measurements guy out there, because then every time a new thing comes out, people will be like, oh, can you measure this, and it gets a bit, it's droning after a while.
Right. And I think it's nice of you to, to say that, you now you're maybe not the only measuring guy, and we see a lot of these like people popping up. Like as you say, Anthony, like he does a very good job of, measuring IEMs. But then you get, you get some that's better than the others, and some people are just, different. Uh but I feel like you really do like somehow, because of maybe your long history, or maybe because of how intimidating your list of measurement and your list of ranking is, that you somehow set this like impossible standard for every other IEM reviewer to like look up to, right? What I mean is that, like, you know, people might have their own measurements. People might have
Mhm.
their own like ranking list, right? It's all the hype
Mhm.
right now. Oh, my own ranking list. I make a joke about, everybody have a list nowadays. But like
Yeah.
everybody, I feel like you kind of set the standard. Like you are the person to like look up to. Is there like some pressure to that kind of like thing as a like a trendsetter, the standard for like
I
IEM?
mean, yes, there's a pressure in that, everyone is like either looking for me, for looking at me with very, very high expectations, or simply waiting for that for that one or two times that I may screw up, you know. So
Uh,
there's absolutely a pressure, but in terms of what I think, how it affects my work, I think it's just I just keep doing what I do. Like, from like way from the beginning, I just did measurements, did impressions, and just kept trucking along. And I think I'm doing about the same thing. It's just that now I have high quality equipment. I have my
right.
own website.
Mhm.
I'm doing a bit more effort with regards to like taking pictures. I actually hate taking pictures, but when you have a website, you gotta
Right.
get that eye candy in
Hmm.
somewhere. But
Uh,
yeah, apart from all these extra niceties, I think it's large. I'm still largely the same guy. I still do the same thing, ranking this, IEMs. Maybe reviews are a bit of a different thing, but I just
mhm.
think that reviews are just extended impressions, anyways.
Right.
So
And you did touch briefly on your updated equipments, and like, and again, compared to your first like very jerry rig version of your measuring rig, and the rig, can you touch, maybe go into, what is the the measuring rig that you use right now, and how did that
Mhm.
came to be? How did that came from this like vinyl tube coupling from
Mhm.
your
Okay,
iPhone
so
into this like
so
professional mic
this
set?
this is a story that I think I've never told anyone, or at least no one has really asked me
Uh, all
before.
right.
So how it started was I was visiting one of my audiophile friends. His name is Yong. His business is called SG Audio Hive as well.
A shout out.
He was one of the first owners that I know of this like Taobao IEC industry standard rig.
Huh.
And for context, you should know that these rigs, if you purchase them from like Bro and Kajir, or maybe I butchered that pronunciation, or Grass, or maybe Audio Precision, which also use Grass, these tiny couplers go upwards of like in the 5-digit range.
Oh
They're
wow.
extremely expensive. But then you buy it off of Taobao, and the it gets remarkably close, because again, it's an industry standard. The standard is out there. You could just download the paper. All of the specifications are there. All you need to do is just know how to build it to the specifications.
Hmm.
And once the Chinese get hold of these specifications, they can just build it for cheap.
And they have no regards for intellectual
Yeah,
property,
they
so they just
and again, they it's not really intellectual property. The reason why the grass and the Brew and Kajir ones are so expensive is because they undergo very rigorous calibrations
oh
and
okay.
very, yeah, and a lot of very, very tight tolerances. And in the case of these Taobao IEC couplers, the tolerances are much more lax,
Hmm.
and in some cases the differences can be quite large. But I've always preached about consistency and repeatability in measurements. So for me, uh, deviations of my coupler to the actual industry standard ones is not too much of a concern to me, because again, I want my measurements to be internally compared.
Hmm.
So it's not really a problem for me. I don't want my measurements being compared to other measurements, even though they're actually quite close. But that's just a byproduct, because I already got this like industry standard rate. But back to the story, Yong, the guy that I saw who owns this, I saw that he has this rig, and I saw like, holy shit, how much do you pay for that? And he was like, oh no, you could just buy it off of Taobao. And then he sent me a link, and then that was it. That was it. I just bought it, and then I learned how to use it like just basically just a jerry rig, using my iPhone. I had a TRS splitter, one side for the headphone in and the other side for the microphone out, and then just started doing measurements just like that.
And then
And
that
it
was
worked.
your rig
Yeah, and
till
I
today.
switched software. I switched software as well. I switched it to one that could save in raw data. There was some glitches. I think some people would have remembered
The
the
jagged.
jagged base.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that.
that was that was a very poor
That was
compensation on
very
the software's part.
annoying.
Yeah,
So how
but
did you
I
get
fixed
around
it.
that problem? You fixed it. How did you get around that problem?
Okay, so the problem was you could upload a calibration file into this software, and it would compensate for the base roll off.
Hmm.
The problem is the compensation was extremely low resolution. So
Uh,
you see it like going up in steps. And that's what created the jagged edges. So rather than using the software calibrations, what I decided to do was to bake in the calibration into the noise file.
ah,
Yeah, so basically I had an EQ set up, and I EQ'd out the bass roll off, and then I recorded the new noise file, which was periodic noise. It was not like standard noises, and then just re-uploaded it into my phone, and then used it, and it worked perfectly. And I just used it from then on.
right. You might not be the first person who used that rig, but I want to say that you're probably the first person to standardize this setup, um, across the few of the audio reviewers that also does like a measuring thing. And as you
Mm.
point out, you're still using these Chinese-made couplers, and there are some internally uh, tolerance problems. Have you ever thought about switching over to these at these 5 digit microphones that you're speaking with?
I've definitely thought about it, but then I did have my couple of like just double checked against like a Brunkershift 4915, and
Hmm.
then the results was that it's like 1 dB, like a 1 dB deviation here and there. It was very close.
Right,
So
but
for the purposes of frequency response measurements, my coupler is more than adequate for to basically be compared with other industry standard graphs.
but it's still very hard to compare your graph versus somebody else's graph, right? Because of these like built-in tolerance
It
issues.
is difficult if you don't know what graphs are. I think my graphs can still be compared with other people who are using the 711 coupler.
Okay.
Yeah, which is
Um.
fine. My graphs can actually be compared with Jude's own measurements from
Ah. Okay.
Headfi. Just that with the caveat that Jude does not have resonance peaks because
Okay.
his rig has like the dampening effect from the new high resolution coupler from Grass. But other than that, comparisons can be made quite well, but with a few caveats. I'm not saying there's going to be an exact one-to-one match, but it's going to be close enough that you can make useful comparisons with.
Hmm. And then since now, why don't I touch up on the ranking list thing, because it's something that you uploaded um relatively infrequently, like back in the day. Um,
Hmm.
and I think there comes like a change, right? Like, do you remember like what's like the second big wave? Like, do you remember when you think like you have to take time, like, because now it's kind of like a part-time job in a way, right? Because
Hmm.
you're getting some kind of Patreon money. It's kind of like a part-time job, but it's still a hobby in a way. Like,
Hmm.
are you trying harder to seek out these IEMs that people are requesting, or is that like some kind of like a motivational
Yeah,
change?
that's definitely true, back then I wasn't asking for review units.
Hmm.
Right now I'm asking for review units a lot more because people keep asking me about this popular thing, that popular thing, and in a lot of cases these things would not have arrived to the distributors in Singapore, or at least it would not arrive in time
Hmm.
for the hype, so
Right,
called.
right.
So at this point, you know what, rather than wait for the distributors to carry all of these, new popular things, I would just ask for the review units because that's what everyone else is doing.
And people
I
are happy to
avoided,
give it to you.
I avoided it for the longest time because um, I would say that I had this misplaced sense of virtue where like, oh, I didn't ask for a review and therefore I'm superior. I know some people think that, and I think that that's a flawed way of thinking. I think review units are a compromise. Like
Okay.
I know for some people they see review units as like, oh, it's just a free thing that I get, and all I have to do is just write a few sentences of good praises for it, and that's it. I get to keep it. But for me, review units are a compromise because I know that at some point my own biases are going to creep in because at the end of the day, it is a free unit, and
Hmm.
that was why I avoided review units for the longest time. But again, without the existence of review units, I would not be reviewing the things that people have been asking me to review.
Right.
So there is always going to be a balance, counterbalance. Again, you could ask for a loaner, but for majority of these like really cheap sci-fi stuff, it's much more practical for these shops to send me something
Hmm.
and just let me keep it because
Right.
returns are just an ass. They have to repackage it. They have to do like B stock stuff and everything. They might have to refurbish it. It's much more work for them, especially for something that costs less than $100.
But back in the day, and I know there are some companies that like got in touch with you, to offer you, not, you didn't ask for it, but offer you a review unit. Back in the day, I feel like it's more of a blessing and a curse because they don't really know what you're gonna write, right? Because you can praise it, and and some very rarely
Yeah,
you do give
yeah,
a positive.
I think in the earlier days of the ranking, it's just again like the ranking list was just that. It was just like a list of items that I think are great or and bad, in just
Right.
ascending order. So a
Hmm.
lot of companies they'll come and ask me like, hey, we got this thing, we'd like you to review it, and they don't say it outright, but I think a lot of times they'll be thinking like, oh, we're gonna get S tier easy, and that was back then. Again, this was before people knew how strict my requirements for S was. So
Uh,
at this point, and people were just sending me a lot of stuff, and then after a
right.
while, things just started to taper off because people realized that I am an absolute hard ass and don't like anything.
Right, and it's kind of hard because I think back in the day it's quite funny that people would send you these things and then I know you don't want to name names, but people would send you these things that they themselves, of course everybody loves their baby, and you would just give it this harsh review ranking a C. Like could you maybe like give me like a good example if you want to of like one of these stories from back in your good old days.
Back in the day, that's the thing.
Right.
Back in the day, I wasn't even actually getting a lot of review units
Just
in the
just that
first place.
first company you
Like, well, can
crushed.
you remind me of anything? Because I can't remember anything off the top of my head right now.
Oh man, I remember your Lime Year review. I remember that.
I was very
Uh,
positive about Lime
well,
years.
yeah,
The
but like you
Model
gave it
X
a C, did you not?
Lime years, no, Lime years. I gave it an A. It was
Did
great.
you
The
really?
Model X was very, very good. The
What was
problem
that
was the
first
A,
one?
the R. That was
Right.
oh,
I think isn't that what it is? Yeah, the one that you gave a really like you reviewed two of their stuff, and one of it is
Lime
pretty
years.
positive. The other one was like, oh, you know, no,
That was like pretty recent as well, so I don't think you're talking about that one. I do remember Spiral Years, but that was not a
okay.
review unit. That was just someone, loaning me their own unit.
But how about this? Let's go to a little bit more maybe just maybe not the spicy drama, the dramas in the past. You have somewhat of a famous history with the American companies, and as a fellow American, what do you have against Americans and
Uh, they
what I'm
gotta
talking
step
about?
up, man. Donald Trump is making them complacent.
Oh man, this is not a political podcast. So what I'm talking about is your history with Campfire Audio, and let's not mention their most recently, their more recent hybrid. How about let's start
Mhm.
with the Andromeda? Uh, how was that? You love like you famously love the Andromeda. What was
I
it?
like it. I think it's a competent set. It has a very esoteric signature. It's lower mid forward and it has that weird treble spikes, but it all worked. It's
Right.
technical, it has imaging, it has a lot of things that most people should like. And it was popular for a reason. It was very easy to like. And I know opinion has shifted because
Because of
and
you?
here's my opinion on why the opinion has shifted. I think it's just cool to hate the old things.
No, don't you
I
think
don't
it
think the
has something to do with
competition
you?
has stepped up enough for the
No,
Andromeda to be considered a shit set, for instance.
but I feel like people love to hate it because of you. It's like a cool thing to hate, right?
Yeah, but that's the
And
thing is that, if people think that it's cool to hate the Andromeda because I like it, then they don't know what happened between Campfire and me.
right, and that's also like it's always been held as back in the day. I remember when you have your own site, right? The Andromeda would be the king, like the entry to TOTL, like top of the line,
The
right?
I called it back then the
Mhm.
S tier gatekeeper. Now
Right,
it's A plus, but it
right,
was the S tier gatekeeper.
right. It was, and it was S minus, and obviously I don't care about anything S minus because it's S tier or get the fuck out. But back in the day, it was still one of the best IEMs, and then but then you have a little history with their new release, and maybe without going, maybe probably gonna go a little bit too deep, but without going too much on it. Um, like what do you have? Like what went wrong there? like the whole Solaris fiasco. You know,
On the surface,
on the
on the
surface.
very surface, it's a very, very simple situation. I heard 3 units, and here's the important distinction. I heard 3 units. I measured them with my microphone. Again, I'm a very consistent person. My methodology is very, very consistent, and all of them measured differently. And that was kind of the end, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but for some reason, the drama picked up because, it was the height of the Solaris drama at that point. I'm sorry, the height of the Solaris hype
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So people got, especially owners at that point, got very understandably upset. And I would too, because if I were to find out that, oh my god, there might be every single Solaris might sound different from each other, and if I bought a Solaris, of course I'll be upset.
Right.
And it just started its own shitstorm. And because of how popular the Andromeda was, the Solaris in turn was getting a bit of that backdraft,
Right.
the back hype from Andromeda is getting the
Mm-hmm.
Solaris even more popular than it should have been.
Right, because I feel like you contribute somehow, contribute to the hype with your with you with you pointing out that there's unit variance, that it really
Mm,
like infuriates the Solaris based on double down on shilling that IEM, right?
yeah.
And funny enough, you still gave it a very good ranking list, right? Right now, is it still not A minus on your list?
Yeah, it's A minus. Like
And how many
it's
hybrids?
again, it's not a bad. It's not a
No, it's
bad.
not.
I think a lot of people mistake like the Solaris drama for me hating the Solaris.
Right.
I think the Solaris is an all right IM. Like it has its problems. I've made very clear what its problems are. I'm not going to repeat them. The unit variance is definitely an issue that needs to be considered when buying a Solaris because as much as Campfire tried to respond to the situation, they have not given a clear answer on what the unit variation situation would
Right.
be. Yeah, so
Um,
no one actually knows what the hell is going on. They just gave PR talk, like empty
and
empty words, and that's it. No one really knows what the hell is going on. But to be fair, the Solaris SE seems to be more or less, well, the unit variation is not there anymore.
and of course, I feel like it might not be your intent, and you're just doing your job as a measuring person to maybe point out these inconsistency of these drivers. But I'm sure if you measure five the same KZ, they will sound different. But Solaris is really like the same, like the first kilobucks, 1.5
Yeah,
grand thing that sounded different from each
yeah.
other, right? And then I
And
feel
and,
like
and, and I think it was either Ken himself or someone else who said that maybe my measurement methodology
oh
was
man,
inconsistent as well.
that
So
was
so I kind of responded with measuring 5 Z1Rs, which was the Solaris's competitor at the time. And
right,
that actually made things worse because people now was saying that I was working for Sony, and I was like trying
right,
to spread
and,
fear, uncertainty, and doubt
right,
within the Campfire fan base.
right, and that's
So
what they
yeah.
brand you as, right? Like as a Solaris, like American hater.
No, they branded me as a Sony
Right,
was
a
what's the
Sony
term
pimp.
called, AstroTurfer. Yes.
Right, because it's funny because you like that was back in the day, right? And you can touch up on the Z1R release a little bit later, but because that was like the Solaris, you measure it, it sounded
Yeah,
wrong.
because it was the example that I tried to
Right,
bring up, but
right,
unfortunately, people try to spin it in a different direction and be like,
right,
"Oh, you are using Sony, like therefore you're working for Sony," which is
right,
kind of like conspiracy theory
right,
levels of
right.
jumping to conclusions.
Um,
But oh well,
but
people
but
will be people.
but it's funny. You measure five different Z1Rs. They actually kind of showed up as the exact same line. without
They are.
plus
I
minus
mean,
half a CV.
that's just basic QC, That
Right,
is
right.
expected. That's what you should
And
expect, especially for something that's more than $1,000.
right. But I feel like people are unhappy, and and a lot of the the Solaris hate from your own fan base is contributing. Like I feel like they do hype up what you said, right? And your community, as in said, like your circle of friends, your community, people just love to hate like campfire audio. I'm not gonna say that you are directly responsible to your fans, but I'm saying that a lot of them really like to bring that drama, bring that heat into these kilobucks IEMs that they think that you don't like. But honestly, when it
Yeah,
comes down to it,
I guess that's what happens when you let such a situation remain unresolved even until today.
right,
People hold grudges, and even though Campfire might have thought that, what, if we ignore it, the situation might go away. But the problem is, now this drama is attached to my identity, almost as a part of my identity as well. So every time, I am brought up, which is quite often these days, at some point, even 2 years after the drama has happened, it's gonna get brought up again.
right,
People are just gonna dig up the dirty laundry. As again, it's just what happens when you keep such a situation unresolved.
right. And you actually don't hate these Solaris that much. Again, against A minus. And off the top of my head, the only IEM that's ranked higher, which is also a hybrid right now, is probably the Tia Trio, right, on the S minus. And there's really not that
Mhm,
many hybrid in your ranking list. So it
mhm.
actually ranks quite high, but I just don't think it really match up the expectations of the CFA fan base. But that's old drama, and kind of boring, and everybody kind of knew about it. How about um, talk about a little bit more recent news on your of your own collaboration. Again, I'm kind of drawing to the end of the first part of this series. Like, why don't you just give me like the brief thing about working with Lion Soul and Don, and just give us a little short story
Well,
about how that.
technically, I was working with Fearless. Linso
Right,
was
right,
just
right,
acting
right.
as a translator because
Mm-hmm.
my Chinese is shit, despite being
Oh, okay.
Chinese myself. But yeah, it started out. I made a post on this. It goes much more in depth, but as just a quick refresher, just a quick summary.
Mm-hmm.
Fearless has this rig called the Y2K system, and it's
Right,
basically it's a tuner's dream.
right.
All the components are housed into this box that has tunable knobs, and then the IEM goes in, you tune it, and then you give the knob numbers to Fearless,
Mm-hmm.
and then Fearless replicates it, sends it back to you, and you get your own bespoke IEM.
Right.
Now, I took this as an opportunity to test drive my preference curve.
Mm, And
So
and and I think I think we're gonna pause the first part from here, and but basically that bring us to now. Like this your new this is your current most recent, like I want to say, big project. So this will be the
mhm.
end of the first part, and there will be a second part, maybe me talking about asking you some more sort of spicier questions, going more into your collaboration with Fearless about how this goes.